Mr. Vance, Congressman Ryan has called you Donald Trump's ass kisser, the implication being you will pay any price for the endorsement and support of the former president who publicly insulted you in Youngstown. To prove the congressman wrong and to show Ohio voters that you are your own man, I would like you to identify one issue that Mr. Trump is wrong about and therefore deserving of public criticism.
Well, look, I disagree with the president on a number of things. He's a friend of mine, of course, and I'm proud to have his endorsement. But look, the thing that was wrong about the Trump administration is they put a lot of people in the administration, a lot of bad personnel folks who actually advocated limitless, nonstop wars that would mean a lot of folks from Mahoning Valley and a lot of folks from where I grew up would have to go off and fight those wars. A guy like John Bolton, for example, should have never been national security advisor in the Trump administration. But let me address Tim Ryan's point and your question there. Donald Trump told a joke. He told a joke at a rally based on a false New York Times story, and Tim Ryan has decided to run his entire campaign on it. Now look, Tim Ryan is publicly out there on national television saying, I love Nancy Pelosi. A few months ago, he went before a national audience and said that he has to suck up and kiss up to Chuck Schumer. The guy who's subservient to the national party is Tim Ryan, who's been begging for these guys to come into this race and save him from the campaign that he's been running. So look, it's ridiculous for him to accuse me of being anything because he has utterly failed to be independent to represent this valley, and he will utterly fail to represent the people of Ohio if he's elected to the United States Senate.
So I get this straight, when the former president said, JD is kissing my ass because he wants my support, you took that as a joke?
I know the president very well, and absolutely, he was joking about a New York Times story. That's all he was doing. I didn't take offense to it. I talked to the president before it. I talked to the president afterwards. Everybody there took it as a joke. This guy goes on national TV and says, I love Nancy Pelosi, and has the audacity of accusing me of kissing anyone's rear end. It's pretty rich.
I would like you to point to an issue that Speaker Pelosi has totally bungled and therefore deserves public repudiation.
Well, let me just first say that this is obviously a clip that JD is running to try to misrepresent people. I ran against Nancy Pelosi, JD, for leadership. And you have to have the courage to take on your own leaders. These leaders in D.C. they will eat you up like a chew toy, right? I mean, you were calling Trump America's Hitler. Then you kissed his ass.
Not true.
It is true. And then you kissed his ass, and then he endorsed you. And you said he's the greatest president of all time. Mitch McConnell gave you $40 million to prop up your campaign. Peter Thiel gave you $15 million. That's $55 million, JD. What do you think they want for that? They want your loyalty. And you proved that you'll kiss their ass too. And look, it's nothing personal. I'm just telling you, like, I've been in this business. It's tough business. If you think you're going to help Ohio, you're not. If you can't even stand up for yourself, how are you going to stand up for the people of the state? How are you going to take on the corporate interests? All the money you took are from the corporations who sent all our jobs overseas. Peter Thiel, $15 million, buddy. What do you think he wants?
Can you answer the question?
So J.D. Vance had the opportunity to defend himself amid criticism that he's an ass kisser for Donald Trump. And so when he was given the opportunity to show that Trump was wrong about something, he said John Bolton was bad. Wow. Talk about not sucking up. I hope Donald Trump doesn't get too upset at such a scathing indictment. Really great to see J.D. Vance prove once and for all that he's not an ass kisser by kissing Donald Trump's ass even more. And look, we all know why the best criticism J.D. Vance could conjure up against Trump was to point to another person who isn't Donald Trump. It's because he, like every other single Republican, is afraid of Trump. It's as simple as that. No one would dare say anything bad about him because all Trump cares about is his delicate ego, and all those Republicans care about are their jobs. In other words, it's just a whole spate of narcissists fawning over another narcissist. And if you're wondering where you fit into that picture, you don't. You gotta love, too, how Vance tries to claim outright that he's never called Trump America's Hitler.
You were calling Trump America's Hitler. Then you kissed his ass.
Not true.
It is true.
And for a guy who is funded by a tech billionaire, you'd think you know how tech works, and how when you say something on the internet, it usually tends to stick around. Like this screenshot here from JD Vance, where he lamented Trump's rise in the GOP in the early days of his presidency, saying, quote, "I'm not surprised by Trump's rise, and I think the entire party has only itself to blame. We are, whether we like it or not, the party of lower income, lower education white people, and I've been saying for a long time that we need to offer those people something, or a demagogue would. We are now at that point. Trump is the fruit of the party's collective neglect. I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical asshole like Nixon who wouldn't be that bad, or that he's America's Hitler. How's that for discouraging?" And here's the thing, I believed JD Vance when he wrote that, but now, because he wants power, suddenly the worst thing he could find it in himself to say about Trump is that John Bolton was in his cabinet, because JD Vance will say anything and will do anything to get power. He stands for nothing, no governing principles, no values, no standards. He will literally run on his friendship with a guy who he himself only 5 minutes ago called America's Hitler, because that's how bad he wants power. If he's willing to befriend a self-proclaimed Hitler, think about what else he'll do in his pursuit of power. Vance then tries to turn the tables and claim that he's apparently an independent thinker, and the real suck-up is Tim Ryan, because he went on TV and said, "I love Nancy Pelosi." Now, I'm not sure if JD Vance was able to catch the news while he was out in Silicon Valley kowtowing to Peter Thiel, but Tim Ryan literally ran against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. You would be hard-pressed to find anyone in the Democratic caucus willing to stand up to leadership to the extent that Tim Ryan has. And look, if Tim Ryan said nice things about Pelosi within the last cycle, that's because she is doing a good job representing a unified Democratic caucus of which he's a part. And that caucus has passed a raft of good progressive legislation geared toward helping working-class Americans. It's passed bills combating climate change and allowing the government to negotiate lower drug prices and capping out-of-pocket expenses for seniors and funding veteran health care and supplying free COVID vaccines and upgrading our nation's roads and bridges and expanding broadband internet to rural areas and bringing the semiconductor chip industry home to the US, a move that's already resulted in a number of companies announcing massive investments and jobs in Ohio. So the idea that it's somehow disqualifying that Tim Ryan has said something nice about Nancy Pelosi is as pathetic as it is desperate. Tim Ryan and the party he's in should be proud of what they've accomplished in the last 2 years. And when you put their record against the Republicans' record of banning abortions, banning books, banning the acknowledgement of the existence of LGBT Americans, and trying to ban Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, I'd side with the Democrats 100 times out of 100. The fact is that we know who JD Vance is. He is someone who will say one thing in private and then say something entirely different in public. He may think that he represents the working man, but in reality, he is exactly like those elites that he complains about. He's identical to those people who will say and do whatever it takes to get power. He stands for nothing and no one other than himself. But I think Tim Ryan's grandmother actually put it best.
My little Italian grandmother had a saying for this when she met somebody like JD Vance. Due facce. You have two faces. One for the camera and one for your business dealings.
Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.